Hello everybody, it's Tommy and welcome back to another video. Today we are starting our first castle build and I am so happy to have this behind me. First of all, I just have to say, obviously I knew castles were going to be very long videos and super time consuming, and this isn't even like one of the most iconic Disney castles. This is one that is probably a little bit lesser known compared to like the classic Disney princess castles and all of that. But even just looking at this castle from the very, very limited footage that I had from the movie, I was so intimidated and definitely nervous about like the lot size and just pulling the whole thing off, making it super functional. And to my knowledge, I think I've only actually ever done maybe one full-size castle long before I started my save file. I used to do mini castles, which I don't actually recommend you go back and check out because they're not very good. If I was going to do them again, they would come out a lot better. And they were mini versions of like Disney castles, some of the more iconic ones like Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, and then I've done Polly Pocket versions of castles as well, but never like a full-sized replica of a Disney castle. So this is my first one ever, and I am actually so happy with how it turned out. It is a very unique build. It has this so old school, medieval, everything is stone and wood, very dark, very creepy. It fits perfectly into Forgotten Hollow, and it is absolutely massive. It ended up being a full 8 stories with 2 or 3 on the bottom level. So I should first tell you guys that this is the Horned King's Castle from the Black Cauldron. And I have to put a disclaimer that I have not seen all of the Black Cauldron in a really long time. I'm not even actually sure if I've seen the whole movie ever. I did go back and rewatch parts of the Black Cauldron before doing this so that I could pull some reference from the movie, but I really didn't have time to like sit down and watch the whole thing. I was actually very surprised. I pulled it up on Disney Plus thinking that it was going to be maybe like an hour long, like some of the older Disney movies were, and it was over an hour. I can't even remember. I think it was like an hour and a half, which I was like, okay, I don't have time for that right this second. But instead, I went through and basically found every scene with the Horned King or every scene that had the castle in it and just watched all of those and sort of took notes. So sometimes I will have to do that on occasion. Like, I think even for Up, when I did that house recreation, I didn't have time to rewatch the entire movie. So I will just like skim through scenes that I think are important. So without having perfect knowledge of the Black Cauldron or really being able to tell you very much about any of the characters at all, I really hope that those of you who like the Black Cauldron and it's one of your like favorite classic Disney movies enjoy today's build. So first of all, most of this castle is shown from the side and from a distance. And something that is a little bit of a trend with a lot of these Disney movies that are older is that you don't really get some really clean, clear references. Even the updated versions of the movie, like when they remaster them for Blu-ray or HD, they still aren't in that like crisp, perfect quality that you will get from some of the later Disney animated films. So you really have to make guesses. And I did a lot of this when I did Cruella's mansion as well. There was one exterior shot of that mansion from a very great distance, and you sort of have to look at it and decide what you think is correct. And that was very much the case for this castle as well. I had maybe 2 or 3 shots from a distance, and then a couple when the main character is actually scaling the castle. You got some shots from underneath that were a little bit more helpful, but in general, I had to do the best that I could with some very grainy shots. But from what I could gather, this is generally the shape that it was. I also, funny enough, couldn't find any replicas or any like recreations of it, which usually, even if I can't find a screenshot, I will often be able to find like a 3D model or blueprints or something that Disney made later that will have more detail about the building. And for this, I couldn't find anything, so I really just had like the one shot. And I actually built this castle. One of the reasons this took so long 3 times because the castle in the movie is shown on a diagonal. So he always sees it as like he's looking at it from the side, and there's this huge round bridge that comes over like some kind of a cavern or a deep ditch or a moat of some type. And that is all like visually apparent from the distance. So that is what I initially wanted to create. So I tried to build this castle on the diagonal, and I think that I might have been able to pull it off, but the lot size just wasn't correct for it. And when you do a foundation as high as I have for this one to really give this castle some height, the stairs need a lot of room on the bottom to be able to connect to the ground floor. So it was basically a problem with the stairs. I actually got everything to fit diagonally, and I thought it looked really great, and I was pretty happy with it, but I could never find a way to get stairs to connect to the bottom floor, which obviously, if I wasn't doing a save file, I probably would have just went with it, but that makes it non-functional, so I did have to decide to just maybe build it straight on, like you're walking straight up to it. And I think that this video and the castle itself is going to go through a lot of transitions because the lack of reference, the lack of knowledge on the movie, and just generally this being the first castle and me really trying to impress and make sure that I am doing this to the best of my ability, it went through a lot of phases where I did something and then I kind of hated it and I would take it away, or things weren't working. I also started this build in the middle of the last patch, so there were things that were added to the game, like platforms, and it wasn't all working. And a lot of people have been having a glitch that literally makes it so your game crashes continuously, which I did experience on some level, but it stopped randomly, and it's not because they sent out an update to my knowledge. I just couldn't open my game for maybe like 20-minute sessions at a time, and every day when I would restart and try and go back to this build, I was unable to open my game for a little while. So obviously that adds a little bit to it. It was definitely annoying and tedious. Something else that I should probably mention is that this build heavily uses the Star Wars pack. And I knew that I was always going to get the Star Wars pack. I obviously would prefer that they had just never made it, because then it wouldn't even be an option. I would figure something else out. But something that initially drew me to that pack, if there was going to be one thing, was the debug catalog. There's a really awesome set of building items, including rocks, trees, building pieces, flags, all sorts of random debug stuff that comes with the Star Wars pack that is perfect for older, medieval, things where you want to make it more mountainous. Just in general, I knew I was going to be very drawn to a lot of the build and buy from the pack. But I was pleasantly surprised that there are some debug stone archways, which you are going to see me use a ton of in this build, and basically frame a lot of the entryways to the castle to make it look even more old school and give it a lot of dimension that I wouldn't have been able to get otherwise. So if you love the castle, I am sorry to say it is super heavy on the Star Wars pack. You're definitely not going to get that full essence if you don't have it. But last time I knew it was on sale, so I recommend picking it up if for no other reason but that. I actually haven't played the pack. I have nothing to say about the pack in general, but I always knew I was going to pick it up for not just the save file, but just the build and buy as well. So very heavy on that. Now that is where all of the rocks in the back are coming from. Now, even though this is the Horn King's castle and it is a recreation from the Black Cauldron, Horn King will definitely live here, and we are of course going to go in and do some interior decorating. But when we were planning in Discord for originally trying to figure out who would live in what houses, what we were going to do with this world, it was brought up that there would be maybe a couple of villains that would live in this castle. So we are actually also going to have Chernobog live here, and Hades will live here as well. And my patron Discord has decided to name them the Demon Bros. And we made like tons of jokes about their characters and how Chernobog is actually like very musically inclined, and then Hades is gonna have Pain and Panic as well. And we're kind of still trying to decide what form I want to do Pain and Panic in, but overall, Chernobog, Horn King, Pain and Panic, and Hades will all live in this castle. And that allows me to put more characters in one space so that we can really do multiple ideas and have room for everything. And we don't have to worry about a residential for like every single one of those characters later on. So we can include all of the characters across the board, especially for characters like Chernobog that are so iconic, but there's not really anything important about their character other than they're just like this devil, demon, pure embodiment of evil. And other than that, like, what do I do with a house for something like that? I could probably come up with some ideas, to be honest, but it just made the most sense to kind of combine them all into this space. So the top few levels are pretty much dedicated to Chernobog and the addition of a lot more rocks to make this feel more mountainous, more like deep in the mountains and very grand, very tall. That is not really depicted in the Black Cauldron, but I sort of added it to mix a little bit of Fantasia in there as well. Something that I don't know how much I've actually talked about this, but I plan to use tool mod pretty heavy on Forgotten Hollow. I haven't used it really too much in this version because the version you guys watch for speed builds is actually not my save file that I put out. It is a separate one that I use for building, and then I move all of the builds over later on, so it doesn't make sense for me to start toolifying these worlds to add little extra things when we just would have to do it over again in the other world. So I plan to do that, and I might even make it into videos. That might be something that I do on live stream, but I have a lot of plans, including making the area around this castle feel way more mountainous by adding even more of these black rocks, so that it kind of fades into the background a little bit and feels like the castle is built into the mountain instead of being confined to the very square nature of this lot and feeling kind of awkwardly placed amongst all of the other houses. We're gonna like extend it around to the background and make it fit into the world a little bit more. I actually have a similar plan with Cruella de Vil's mansion. I'm going to add like more trees, more forest to the background so that it doesn't all feel very squared off. And then for the Haunted Mansion, I plan to add a graveyard site off to the side, kind of like a garden graveyard area, and all of the stones are going to be based after Haunted Mansion characters. So there's more to come. I actually also want to decorate the middle part here and maybe do something different. I had written down like a Mickey's pumpkin patch to symbolize, again, something else from the Disney parks, but I definitely want to change that area as well. And when we start the other version of Forgotten Hollow, I have even more plans to tie in some stuff from the different Tim Burton movies, which I'll talk about when we actually get later on in some of those videos. But that's definitely the plan for this world, even more so than some of the other ones. It's on my list of like to do, and I plan to kind of go back and add a bunch of stuff with Tool. Just in case you don't know, Tool is basically a mod that lets you add stuff outside of lots. So you can add extra trees, you can kind of move stuff around, rocks, anything, you kind of place it on the lot, and then you click somewhere else and it will move it into the other parts of the world scenery permanently. And when you download the save file, but only if you download like the actual save file, you will actually get all of that stuff and all those extra little additions. You don't even need to have the tool mod installed. If you just download my lots off of the gallery, that's something that will be missing from the final version. So just keep that in mind for future builds as well. And I do actually have to go back and update Evergreen Harbor, Willow Creek. I have some plans for stuff that I'm going to add there now that I'm more familiar with the mod and I know that it can carry over in like a save file form. I'm really excited to even bump this up to the next level. There are quite a few pretty big cuts in today's speed build. Obviously, I had to be really, really picky about what we were going to include. There is so much time that went into this, and one thing that's horrible about using the debug catalog is the fact that you cannot hold shift down to replicate items. So every time I want to repeat an archway over and over again, I have to grab it from the catalog, and those are just extra little seconds that are adding on to the the tediousness of the video and makes the footage long and makes me kind of consider what I'm going to keep and what I'm going to cut. But I did want you guys to see some of what I was doing with the arches and the stuff from the Star Wars pack, the extra like stone fences and I don't know what else they would be called, but fences and archways and broken walls and stuff that I've sort of used around. I think initially I was a little bit frustrated by the fact that they are such large objects that, in particular, like these archways are clipping in and out of the walls in different spaces, but I actually sort of like it. It gives a lot of dimension to the rooms, and it feels very much like a handmade stone castle where things don't always line up, they're not even. You'll have like pieces that are sort of clipping through walls or chunks that are broken off, and even when you see some of the characters running throughout the castle, you can definitely see that in the castle's design itself. So something that I was kind of initially worried about and thinking maybe I won't actually use these archways because they're so thick that they go through the wall ended up being such a huge positive. Now I will do a tour video of this as well. You guys really liked the last one, and I am so happy that that was the case. So many of you asked me to continue doing them for future larger speed builds, so I will definitely be putting out a tour video after this. I actually have a little bit of a schedule that is going to carry out throughout the week, but it's going to mean a lot of content this week, which I'm sure many of you are going to be excited about. So we have today's video, which is going to be obviously the castle speed build. Now Hades is also living in this castle. He is going to have his own version of the underworld, and that is going to take up the bottom 2 levels of this castle. I did actually cut that footage, and I'm deciding to put it in its own video so that I can focus a little bit more time on it, and I can do a separate speed build video where you guys can really see in more depth the underworld and just make it so that I don't have to cut or rush as much of that footage out. So that is going to be, I think, the next build video. I will put that out, and then we'll do a tour of this entire place, including the underworld, and then I'm going to be putting out 2 creative sims, one with Horn King and Chernobog and one with Hades, Pain, and Panic. So most of that content should be coming out throughout this week and through the weekend. And I hope you guys enjoy all of it. I have already started the underworld, and I have to say that I absolutely love it. I think a lot of you are really going to be very impressed and happy with how it came out. Hades' themed bedroom in the previous Haunted Mansion, the Villains Nightclub, was very popular. A lot of you really enjoyed it, which I'm so excited about because I absolutely love Hercules and in particular Hades. And even just rewatching some of the footage from Hercules the other day when I was doing so to get ready for the underworld build, I absolutely love his character. I think that he is one of the most brilliantly done villains. Very like on par with Scar and Captain Hook. Like he has those kind of vibes, but he just has so much personality, and he's one of my favorite Disney villains by far. So any representation that we get to do for him, and in particular Hercules, that I am also a very big fan of, and I think is such a glossed over hidden gem with beautiful animation, and I love the story so much. I don't know why it's not as popular as some of the other ones, and why like Hercules in particular gets skipped over as one of the, like, I think best male Disney characters. He's just like such a kind, good-hearted, good-spirited person, and even like some of the popular like male characters don't always share those traits in the Disney universe. So I absolutely love him, and I'm just really excited to in the future also do more Hercules related stuff, probably a lot in Oasis Springs. Obviously, if we got like a beautiful Greek themed world, that would just make my life, and I would completely go off and do incredible work with it. But up until this point, I plan to do that kind of stuff in Oasis Springs. So it's coming down the line. We will see in the future. Now, any moment there should be a pretty large cut that is going to go to the interior and doing some decorating. We're going to start from the top level down. I was thinking very, very minimalistic for this build, which is super outside of my comfort zone, but it doesn't make any sense at all to start cluttering this place up with a ton of furniture, especially if we're going for this very medieval style castle. We want to stick to wood, stone, Nothing really like fancy, nothing obviously electronic, or even just like big comfy chairs that are fabric wrapped and stuff like that. I wanted to stay away from. So instead, the details are in like the wall textures, the archways, the wooden archways with like the extra blocks at the bottom, and the stone pieces that are coming from the Star Wars pack. So I tried to throw details in where I felt like I could, but it's definitely not going to be in like the interior design. Everything is very basic and minimalistic. And I also have to say that what I think I'm going to do, I think Pain and Panic are going to become like the servants of this castle. It's very big, and I just cannot imagine Hades or Chernobog or Horn King like cleaning, cooking, or even like going downstairs into the kitchen and doing all of that stuff. The same can be said for pretty much any of the Disney villains, but I think that they need to have servants. And I was initially thinking about like making some just that can serve as like servants. But Pain and Panic work pretty well, especially after watching the clips from Hercules. They are basically servants to him and at his beck and call. So I think that in this case, they will serve well for everybody and just generally be like the slaves of the castle. And like I said, we are currently voting on Patreon, and I'm sort of trying to figure out what I want to do with Pain and Panic. It obviously would be super great if I could just make like cute little devil imaginary character type of creatures to kind of follow Hades around. Initially, somebody had suggested to me that I make them toddlers, but it sort of didn't work because then I would have had to make Hades take care of them or somebody take care of them. So although it would have been really cute and sort of like on par with their size, it didn't work in the long run and doesn't make sense for maybe like the lore. So I ran a poll, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly what I want to do, if I want to represent them as children, teens, young adults, if I want them to be aliens or vampires or spellcasters. So I'm not quite sure as of recording this what they're going to end up being. You guys will actually see that video later on in the week, so you will find out soon. But it'll be interesting to see. I want to do something a little bit creative with them, and I even had thought maybe making them into familiars, like doing them as cats or dogs, and sort of making a cat or a dog like represent them, or picking from the familiars in the game that most closely resemble their characters and then using those. But none of it really seemed like it was going to work out very well. So I think they are actually going to be human characters. And later on in the dungeon section of this build, you guys are going to get to see what I think is going to become their bedroom. But I'll focus more on that stuff when we actually get to the underworld speed build as well. So starting out with the very, very highest point of this castle, like I mentioned, the top levels are sort of for Chernobog. And I think I'm going to actually lock the top level doors to everybody except for him, so he has that sort of like reign over the top parts of the castle, which again is obviously a reference to Fantasia and like his big character sort of looming over the village and over the mountainside. And Fantasia is all about music, so I thought that it would be kind of clever to have like an organ up top, and that he might be a little bit musically inclined. So there are some instruments around that he can play, and he would like sort of come to the top of the castle and you would hear him on the very highest level playing the organ. And I think that's something like kind of unique and a little bit ominous, but also sort of funny for his character, especially when you guys see what he's going to look like. He will in fact be a vampire, which is so exciting. We are in the vampire world and we're finally going to be doing a vampire. So that'll be fun to create something a little bit gnarly looking. And I think for his human form as well, he won't even really have a human form, because even his human form is going to look very scary, decrepit, and just generally like his character. The level right below that one, like I said, very minimal on the furniture, if anything at all. It sort of just serves as like a passageway. When you get to the level below that, that is actually the main floor that you come up the stairs to. So there are 2 bedrooms on this floor. One is for Horn King, and that is the one we are currently decorating. We will also decorate one for Chernobog as well. They are very open and exposed to the elements. You have these archways that are completely open to the mountainside, which again, I think is something that is depicted in medieval style castles, these very like open sort of archways. And I do wish we just had one pack that allowed me to to have some furniture that is even more old looking than some of the stuff that you get from Vampires or Realm of Magic. A lot of that stuff is still just a bit too modern for what I was going for in here, but there's nothing really that I could do about something like that. So instead, I tried to just theme it after the character. For Horn King, I really was thinking, obviously, skeletons. He is going to be either a vampire or a spellcaster. I cannot remember actually which one. He might be a vampire. I can't remember. We were sort of going back and forth about it on my Discord, so I'm not sure which one we ultimately decided. But he is just like this very evil, again, like not much of a personality. Obviously, he has a goal throughout the movie. He is going and looking for the Black Cauldron and he wants it. I couldn't even tell you why. I didn't watch that part of the movie. And then his character itself is like red. He wears like the red hood. So I tried to do little bits here and there to sort of represent his character. Chernobog's room was actually a lot easier. We have some statues that come from vampires that remind me very much of the shape of his character. And I was thinking of the scenes where he is trying to like light fire to the village and sort of set the whole village on fire. So I thought it would be cool to use this little city/village replica from Cats and Dogs and put like a crystal ball on top of it, almost like he can sort of use it to keep watch and do what he will with it. I also placed a fireplace under there, which I have to play test, and I have a feeling I will not be able to keep because it will light the entire room on fire and just ruin everything. I'm not sure. I've never done something like that before. If I can keep it, I definitely will because I think it's a cool idea. But it was supposed to be a shout out to Fantasia in a very, very subtle way. His character design, obviously, like I said, it reminds me so much of these statues from Vampires. And then it's just like this black, dark, devilish type of character. So that Realm of Magic bed and corresponding with the one in the other room as well is really what I think works best for their rooms. Nothing like too luxurious. I don't even really picture them spending like too much time in here. I wasn't worried about giving them these huge master bedrooms. I feel like they just wouldn't even really care. They just need somewhere to sleep and maybe somewhere to cast a spell or two or bring a victim or two into their room. So minimal again on the furniture, but still more so than a lot of the other rooms in the house. And even for like Pain and Panic and Hades and stuff, they're not really going to get too much furniture. Hades gets 2 of his own floors, but like Pain and Panic basically get a closet at the end of the day. In fact, I think that the chair in Chernobog's room is the one and only non-stone chair in the house. And I think he would like rank above Horn King. I think that they could like somehow find a way to live together and not kill one another and probably work together very well. But I think Horn King would know that Chernobog would absolutely ruin his life if he wanted to. So he probably wouldn't mess with him too much. And I think at the end of the day that Chernobog would probably be the throne holder, more important character, and everybody would kind of just do what he says. But obviously you can do whatever you want. Now, one scene that really caught my eye in the Black Cauldron when I was going through the movie is the scene where a lot of the characters are like partying in this big room. They're drinking. They're all sort of around the fireplace. And then Horn King comes in to sit on his throne. And that's when they bring the pig character in to try and get the pig to show him where the Black Cauldron is. So I wanted to recreate this throne room and the table where everybody is partying as kind of like the living room area, but very medieval style, very much a depiction of the movie and another way to represent something cool from one of the movies. So his throne was like completely wood and rocks built into the wall. You don't get too many shots of it, but I got the gist of what they were trying to do. So I had to piece some different stuff together there. And again, I will have to play test that and just make sure that it absolutely works. But I think that it came out pretty decent without actually having any thrones in the game and without using CC, because there are really, really cool like thrones in the custom content community that would have served pretty perfectly, but we need to make do with what we have in the game. So that is what we went with. And then you will notice throughout the build little pops of Snowy Escape in here, a pack that you would just not even think to use, but I have used. The rug that comes with Snowy Escape is like a fur rug, and obviously that fits really well into a build like this. So we have little bits of Snowy Escape here and there. Even some of the furniture, if it wasn't just like so modern looking, it would have been really useful because a lot of it comes with like fur laid over a chair or little fur seats on picnic tables and that kind of stuff. So that would have been super, super helpful. But I did use it here and there throughout the build. So it will actually also be required for the entire version of this build. I haven't had too much of an opportunity to pop into the new world yet and check out the lots. I've been so busy with this. And to be honest, I don't really want to start planning for the new world until I'm completely done with both versions of Forgotten Hollow, because I will get so excited about what is to come that I will actually not want to do Forgotten Hollow anymore, and that'll obviously affect what I'm creating, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm kind of holding back a little bit. Lots and lots of people, I'm sure, doing speed builds and content from Snowy Escape, and obviously I want to be right there doing it with them, but I just have to focus on what I'm working on currently, and then we will do some planning later. I will talk more probably later in the second Forgotten Hollow world, what I am thinking, what I'm planning out. And of course, if you were a member of my Patreon, I have been doing these little like planning sessions whenever we pick a new world, where we go through what movies are we going to use, what characters, who's going to live, sort of where, what would work here and what wouldn't. What movies are we going to do? What movies could we probably move to a different world? And we did a couple of those brainstorming sessions before we started Forgotten Hollow, and my patrons helped me come up with all of their ideas, and doing characters even like this one, like the Horn King's castle would have never ended up in this world if not for my patrons, because I am not familiar with the Black Cauldron at all. I would have never even considered to do the castle. I probably also would have forgotten to do anything representing Chernobog, because he's just not a character that comes up very often in my head when I'm thinking of like classic Disney villains, and they were very much helpful in that instance to bring some new ideas to the table that wouldn't have come up otherwise. So I'm excited to do a brainstorming session with them for Snowy Escape. I can't again do it for a little while, but if you are a member of my Patreon, that is kind of like a perk that we do in Discord. So moving on to the level below the throne room and the 2 bedrooms and sort of the hallways upstairs, we have what is going to basically be the kitchen slash room that you would brew potions. And it's again very, very simple. I wanted to make everything look like it was made of stone, and maybe more a little bit handmade than some of the stuff that is readily available in the game. So a lot of like the kitchen counters and the stoves and stuff, I wanted to like build them into the wall and put stone around them to make them feel like they were a part of the wall, especially because you have a lot of these rocks coming through that are actually from the moat area, where I've decorated to use them like to come up through the bottom floor so that it looks like a mountainside. They sort of peek into the walls on the bottom levels, which I didn't mind at all. When you zoom in completely to the build, they sort of disappear. That's something that happens with debug items, but I really think again it plays into the idea of the castle sort of being built into the mountainside. You have these lower levels where really only servants are going to go anyway, and they have everything built into the stone, and everything is kind of pieced together down here to feel very much like they had to make do with whatever they had. So we have the area where you can brew potions, again, a Black Cauldron, and then I'm using the brand new fireplace from Snowy Escape, but again, way too modern for this build. Wasn't gonna work. The thing that I liked about it is that it's just a stone slab with some wood on top of it, and that's perfect for a fireplace like this, but I needed it to be more cave, more like kiln or something for a blacksmith even. So I did the same idea with the rocks building sort of around it to make it look like it is a different object completely. And again, we're not going to do too much on this floor. There is actually a lot of space here, but because of the way that the rocks come in and out of the walls, I didn't want to overcomplicate it and put too much in here, because then you'll have Sims sort of walking in and out of the stone pieces. And that is something that is unique with debug as well. If you weren't aware, most of the items in the debug catalog, your Sims cannot actually register as actual items. So you won't have problems walking around down there. Your Sims will sort of just walk straight through the rocks, most of them, I believe. I gotta play test. That's always like something with a disclaimer. But for the most part, they should be able to get sort of through the walls and through the passageways pretty easily. I did something similar at the Big Hero 6 Microbot nightclub that had a chain fence over the doorway, and your Sims will just walk straight through it because it's a debug item. Now, the level right below that is a dungeon, and I am so excited to do the first dungeon in the save file. We are obviously going to have more, and I think even initially when I was designing this castle, I didn't intend to have a dungeon here. I was really going to leave the bottom few levels for Hades' underworld, but the dungeon is something that is shown in the movie. It is sort of a part of the story, so I wanted to bring another reference from the movie in again. So right below the kitchen, and then you will also have the servant's bedroom in here. And like I said, I think that that is going to be Pain and Panic, so for all intents and purposes, this bedroom is going to belong to Pain and Panic. I'm going to redesign it a little bit in the Underworld speed build video so that you can see the theming of the two characters in the room. When I initially designed it, it was more going to be just like a random servant or somebody who is working for the dungeon or sort of watching the dungeon, but I wanted to update it so that it fits their characters a little bit more. So this room will actually change, and that will be in the Underworld speed build video. I also had to cut a lot of the footage from just the dungeon in general because, again, it was just a lot of debug items. Those pipes that I'm using for the bars of every cell are debug items from Get to Work. And you'll notice that they don't have doors. I don't intend for the dungeons to be functional. In fact, the only doors that we really have are the ones that come from Get to Work, and I think that they are part of the policing career, but they're way too modern. And like I mentioned, those cells are actually made completely out of debug items, so your Sims could walk in and out of them regardless. Your Sim will not treat them as a room, so you can't actually like put anybody into the dungeon spaces because your Sims will literally just walk out. You would have to lock doors and completely remove staircases and all of that stuff. So they're really just for show, but again, I think that it was super important to include, as it is like part of the movie, some beds, a toilet in there for just to show how nasty that would be and just to show how awful it would feel. And I was very deliberate about like candle placement and making sure that light was very minimal, and you have these really high up windows, which to me never really makes sense, but every movie ever shows a dungeon and then there will be some kind of a window, and you're always like, why do they have a window in the dungeon? You know they're going to use that to escape, and then they do. So I thought that that was a funny little thing to add in. And that is actually going to be the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned for some of the screenshots that we have here, and part 2, which will be Hades Underworld, will be out very shortly, tomorrow if not the next day. If you would like to support the Disney Save on Patreon, you can do so by clicking the link in my description box down below or the one at the end of the video. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Hit that little bell icon below to turn on post notifications so you can get updated every single time I post. And I will talk to you all in the next one.